Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Meyer. I'm the Sustainable Food Programs Coordinator at UC Merced. And my colleague and I, Guillermo, he will be joining us in about 30 minutes or so. We started this AMA series, Ask Me Anything series, to talk to experts in their field about a variety of sustainability-related topics. And today we've got Jillian to join us, and I'm super excited. We're going to talk all things sustainable. And the way this goes is that I'm going to have her then do a little short intro, and then if you all have questions, you can either raise your digital hand or your actual hand if you're on video, or you could just come off mute and ask it if you want, or you can put it in the chat. Variety of different ways. So we'll get started here. Jillian, please introduce yourself if you could.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. I appreciate you having me. This is a fun opportunity to share and nerd out on sustainability, which is something that I really love doing. I usually say that my sustainability story started when my dad installed a can crusher on the basement wall of our house. And my chore was to put aluminum cans in that crusher, crush them, and then take them out to the curbside recycling every week. And I remember at that time when I was a kid, I was probably 10 or so, we'd also take materials back to the grocery store. You could return bottles and all sorts of things. And I sort of became fascinated with reuse and the idea that you could take something that you already used and turn it into something else. And really ever since then, being a kid through high school and into college, I can just remember wanting to save the planet. That is what I was passionate about. And when I was in college, I'm from Ohio. I grew up in Toledo, Ohio. And I went to Ohio University as an undergrad, go Bobcats. And because I wanted to work with earth systems, I thought I wanted to be a biologist, and quickly learned that everyone in my classes wanted to be a doctor. And I thought, I'm in the wrong spot here. So I got some great advice to actually read the course catalog and circle the courses that were of interest to me. And at the time I was living in the residence halls, and you actually got a paper course catalog. It was propping up my very heavy residence hall door. And I circled a bunch of things, and everything was geography related. So I spoke with a professor, took a course, and switched my major to environmental geography. I have an undergrad and my bachelor's of science is in environmental geography. And when I graduated, I was encouraged to go to graduate school. And at the time, I was doing a lot of studying about the rolling brownouts and blackouts and the energy programs happening in California. So I applied to schools in California. I was accepted at California State University, Chico, where I did my master's thesis on 23 schools in the CSU. One energy policy is that an effective use of energy during a climate crisis. And I made an argument from a geographical standpoint that energy policy within the CSU should be by climate zone, because many of the CSU campuses are scattered throughout the state. Coastal schools don't use the same energy as interior schools and schools in the foothills and things like that. Once I finished my thesis, Chico State opened up a position for a campus sustainability officer. This was in the mid 2000s. So pretty early on the scenes for sustainability in higher ed. I applied for that position and I got it. So I was the first sustainability officer at Chico State, and also the first sustainability officer in the California State University system. Now all 23 schools have at least one sustainability officer, which is pretty exciting stuff. And the system is on its second sustainability policy, though it does not yet do energy policy by climate zone. But I'd like to think they changed a few things because of some of the work I did. I was at Chico State for a few years, and there I piloted the AASHE STARS program. It was pretty early days when STARS was just coming out. For those of you that aren't aware, STARS is the Sustainability Tracking, Assessment, and Rating System for higher education. Sort of like LEED for green buildings. It allows colleges and universities to look at where sustainability is integrated into academics, operations, engagement, and also planning and administrative aspects. And because I had piloted STARS and was presenting at conferences with AASHE staff, I had the opportunity to take a role at AASHE, working on their annual conference, which rolled also into a full-time position working on the STARS program, which was really exciting work. I helped develop STARS with several subject matter experts and a great team of people. AASHE is a really wonderful resource if you do higher education sustainability work or you want to learn more about it. UC Merced, I'm guessing, is an AASHE member, so you get a lot of access that way. And then I was at AASHE for quite a few years when I decided I was ready to be back on a college campus, and a position for the Director of Sustainability opened up at California State University East Bay, and I applied and earned that position and started the program there in Hayward, California, in the East Bay, which is about halfway between Oakland and San Jose. I was in that position for about 7 years when COVID hit and my world sort of turned upside down, and I was looking to do something different. And there was an opportunity to join the energy and sustainability team at Brailsford and Dunlavey. So at Brailsford and Dunlavey, we are a consulting firm. We work with a lot of clients doing owner advisory services, primarily in the built environment, and the energy and sustainability team works not only on the built environment, but also on climate action planning, sustainability planning, energy transition work, that sort of thing. So we work internally with different B&D teams to help advise around energy and sustainability and built environment work, but then we also work with individual institutions on furthering their sustainability efforts. And with that, I'll leave it. I live in Northern California in the smallest incorporated city by landmass, Amador City. It's a third of a square mile, which is about 40 miles southeast of Sacramento in the foothills. So Erin, I'll pass it back over to you.
Impressive resume. Wow. All right. So like I said, if anyone has questions, you can put them in the chat or raise your hand digitally or in the video. I'll pause if anyone has any. Otherwise, there are some that came in on the chat, but really this conversation is for you all to ask anything of our expert.
Cue Jeopardy theme song.
All right, I'm going to go over to some of our questions that came in via the registration link.
Great.
One person asked, what is the key to successfully converting ideas into actions?
That's a very good question. I would say, well, a few things. One is data. It's really great when you have an idea to be able to back up how you want to turn that idea into an action with data. So that doesn't always have to be numbers. It can also be qualitative data as well. What's the research that's out there? What do experts say? You know, are there numbers you can crunch or numbers that have already been crunched that you can point to? And then I'd also say it's building relationships and getting buy-in from the stakeholders that can actually help with the implementation. So if you want to do something like, I don't know, have solar covered bike parking on your campus, you have to make sure that you're talking to the parking department. You have to make sure you're also talking to the facilities folks that do infrastructure and also your energy manager. There are a lot of different stakeholders. Maybe there's a student club that works on bicycle promotion or alternative transportation. So making sure that you're including everyone early in the conversation and building buy-in and support, I think is really helpful to move an idea to action.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that can be really hard to do, just figuring out all the people that are even interested or considered stakeholders on that project. All right, thank you for answering that. And the person that asked that is in the audience. So if you have any follow-up questions, feel free and put it in the chat too. Otherwise, the next question, I don't know if this was relevant, if this person knew what they were signing up for when they signed up, but someone asked how the Bitcoin is working. Do you know anything about Bitcoin?
I don't know much about Bitcoin. I do know Bitcoin mining is highly energy intensive, and from an energy standpoint, it's not the most sustainable option when it comes to currency. And I think that's something that people don't know a lot about. So if you consider yourself an environmental activist or someone who cares a lot about energy efficiency, I think I would suggest doing some research around how Bitcoin is farmed before investing in it, if that's, you want to put your money where your mouth is, I guess.
Yeah, I concur on that. And if any other folks are in the audience that know anything about Bitcoin, feel free and chime in, because that is also not my area of expertise.
Yeah, just quick follow-up. Why is it energy intensive? It has to do with the amount of, and I might get this wrong, I'm not an expert, but it's my understanding that has to do with the computer systems and servers, it's very intensive, I guess, for the development of the virtual currency to be able to develop it, because each currency is unique. So
Yeah.
it has something to do with like server space and the energy to provide server space and things like that.
Yeah, because like the computers are constantly running.
Yeah.
Which requires energy. Like you can't shut it off because it's a currency, I guess. I don't know. I'm speaking out of my area of expertise, but yeah,
Same.
I think we're kind of figuring this out together.
Absolutely.
So someone asked, do you have any advice for someone just starting out in sustainability?
I'd say network. I mean, put yourself out there, get outside of your comfort zone, take a class that you don't know anything about that might be of interest. Go to a mixer for sometimes you can do like a meetup group or something where you can network in an environmental professional circle. Take free webinars or courses on YouTube. Go to conferences, talk to mentors, do informational interviews with people that you think have cool LinkedIn pages. I would just say, talk to as many people as you can, put yourself out there. And another piece of advice I think that is helpful in the sustainability world is, do you want to be a sustainability generalist or do you want to be a sustainability subject matter expert? I'm a generalist. I know a little bit about everything when it comes to sustainability. Typically, campus sustainability officers are generalists because they need to know about procurement, transportation, dining, housing, energy, academics. But there are other folks that really want to take a deep dive into some of those subjects. They really want to know about energy efficiency. They really want to know about sustainable procurement. And so I think choosing one or the other can help you on your path too. I hope that helps. Happy to follow up.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Regarding like networking, there's things called like green drinks or something like that. Like some areas have more folks that are interested in sustainability, unfortunately, than Merced, and they organize like green drinks sessions where they all go out and get drinks and everything. I personally would love to see some sort of like networking going on in the Central Valley, Merced specifically, around sustainability. It's great that there's so many folks on this Zoom call, especially so early on in January. I didn't think there would be that many people here because of the holiday. But it's great to see so many people that are interested in sustainability from UC Merced that are here and keep on that track, because we need more folks pushing for sustainability here and evereverywhere.
Sounds like Erin's going to start a meetup group in Merced.
Yeah, I might need to. But I might need to use Bitcoin because apparently meetup costs money. So I'll have to use Bitcoin to buy the meetup, maybe? I don't know.
I think there are Facebook groups and things like that, or, good old messaging boards on the college campus.
Yeah, that's a valid point. Alrighty. Megan, your hand is raised.
Welcome. Thank you for having this seminar today. I really appreciate it because sustainability is one of the key factors that procurement works with, and we're on numerous groups. So there's a sustainability procurement working group that we are involved with all 10 campuses. We're also on the Chancellor's Advisory Committee for the UC Merced. We do a lot of analysis on green spend and areas like that. But trying to find those individuals on our campus that really want to jump into some sustainable work is been a challenge for me. We have our groups and we're involved, but it's very important that the University of California is huge on sustainability. They're one of the top universities that really cares about what we're doing to our planet. And so with that, we have the single-use plastics. Now trying to get plastic bottles to boxes of water, trying to get, bottles, plastic bottles or yogurt containers or small plastic things that we see everywhere in every place. How do you handle single-use plastics, and what is your advice for really putting that into kind of a visual picture that can help everybody understand We're not trying to take that yogurt container away from you or that bottle of water, but there are alternatives that may cost 10 cents more, but will save us $85,000 in landfill. You know, trying to tell them that, even getting in front of them to tell them the benefits is hard.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah.
The CSU has a single-use plastics policy you can easily find online. And I would say one way to move the needle is to get a leadership commitment, something you can point to. It's helpful to sometimes have that top-down approach if you don't have it already. Now, the other piece is you have to make it easy for people. So what systems can you put in place programmatically and operationally so that it's just part of the fabric where you are, versus people have to individually make a change, because behavior change on an individual basis is very difficult. Regardless if you scare people into, you know, the climate crisis, or if you say it's going to save all this money, people are like, but what about convenience and my habits? You know, it's just something that is difficult to change. So I would say work within what you can control within the systems that you have to just change how things are. When I worked at Cal State East Bay, we transitioned from single stream waste, where you could put everything into one bin and it got sorted off site, to sorting at the bin. So you had a compost bin, a recycling bin, and a landfill bin. It was really challenging for people. But the incoming first year students thought that's how we always did it. So by the time that they were fourth years, everyone started doing it and it was working pretty well. I mean, you have that margin of error. But I think if you can install these systems and people think this is how we do things here, then it's going to be easier to get them to buy into the systems. And also too, sometimes you just have to change things, you know, and people don't like it when their, you know, favorite Fuji water brand is taken away and, you know, now they have this box water option or something like that. But I think if you tell people why you're doing it, if you can get students to tell people why you're doing it, and really build a marketing campaign around it, sometimes that can help too. I hope that answered your question. I know that's a tough one. I mean, in my personal life, one of my mantras is consider your impact. You know, you're not always going to be the best at everything. Especially when it comes from a sustainability standpoint. People like to put a lens on you and be like, ooh, she drives a combustion engine car, you know, like, ooh. I got yelled at one time for wearing a leather belt at a party. And I was like, wow. But anyway, I digress. So I'm just trying to think about, like, what is this plastic water bottle going to do? Or what is that, you know, disposable plastic cutlery going to do? You know, can I make a simple change in my life that will have an impact later? I mean, the stat you said about the cost of landfill, that is mind blowing to me. Can you put that in front of people? Can you have a little bit of a wow factor there? Like, we're going to change this thing and this is why. And also letting people know that they're a huge, important piece of making it successful. Because I think deep down, everybody wants to do the right thing, right? The thing that's helpful for most.
Time too. People, you don't have the time to show them the value and do the cost analysis to say, having 85 of these costs you X, having 4 of them that are more sustainable costs you Y, but it's going to save you in the long run. So it's really building that business case and having the time to do that, if they're even willing to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, so work within the systems that you have to make those changes that you have control over, get that leadership buy-in to help with your messaging, and then, you know, do a little bit of a push down, but work with students to do the ground up too. Hope that helps. Good question. Long answer. Good question.
I think that's great. I think one thing that I would also add is, like, focus on the positives as opposed to like negative messaging and like shaming. No one wants to be shamed, like with the leather belt or like with the, you know, oh, you're a sustainability folk, why do you have a water bottle, whatever it is, right? So keeping things positive and fun in the messaging and marketing, I think, goes a lot further than shame or negative kind of things. And kind of related to that, I have a personal question about eco guilt, and if you experience it, And if so, what you do about it. Like, I am a food waste expert. If I drop like the smallest bit of like celery on the ground, obviously I'll wash it off, but like I feel really bad even if I waste anything, right? And then with my showers, like it gets a little extreme. I'm very sustainable and it causes some eco guilt and eco grief if I'm not behaving 100% sustainable, if that makes sense. So how do people cope with the fact that like it's impossible to be perfect, right? And I don't know, do you have any words of wisdom on that?
I mean, I'd love to hear what people have to say about this one in the chat, because I think everybody probably has a different piece of advice on this one. I mean, again, considering your impact, do the best with what you've got. We're not all perfect. And also, I think, you know, it's easy to beat yourself up about environmental issues. If you believe very strongly in environmental issues, it's easy to get overwhelmed and be consumed by the negative. So I think, again, like you'd said, like try to keep it as positive as possible. Give yourself some grace. None of us are perfect. And I'd also just encourage you to think about building your community, talking to other people. What are other people doing? Like, can you have a big collective impact? So maybe when you know, I don't know, do something that you think, oh, I was so wasteful and I feel really bad about that. You have a community to talk to about that and remind you that, you know, as a collective, you're doing things that are really impactful. And I would just say also to have systems in your life to help reduce stress. So when that happens and it's stress triggering, you can, I don't know, go for a run or hang out with your friends or read a book or whatever to have it not be too bad. I hope that's an okay answer to that one.
Helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bunch of questions in the chat. So what sustainability aspects would we want to see in social and environmental conscious home goods, like towels, throws, linen, stuff like that?
Yeah, so when it comes to purchasing goods, and our procurement experts on the call here probably can add here, I think about where's it voting with your dollar, right? Like, what is your dollar going towards? And when I think about voting with my dollar, I personally think about how far is that thing? First of all, do I need that thing? Second of all, how far is that thing coming to get to me? You know, your carbon emissions associated with the transportation, because we know in the United States that transit emissions are the #1 greenhouse gas emitters. So can I keep the transportation emissions down? 3, who is my money supporting? Am I supporting a gigantic corporation that doesn't treat their employees well? Or am I supporting, you know, maybe a local organization that is trying to do good locally in the community where I live? So I think it's really not so much about the product that you're purchasing. I mean, yes, think about that, but think about the product that system is in, and how can you make the system better by the purchases that you're making.
I like that as just like a quote for the day, like make the system better. Take that into the rest of my day. Okay, so what is your advice for having conversations with folks who don't engage in sustainability behaviors? How do you increase awareness without making folks defensive?
Oh yeah, I definitely have an answer for this. Ask a lot of questions. There is a wonderful book from the Harvard Negotiation Project called Difficult Conversations. I highly recommend that book for anyone to read. It doesn't have anything to do with sustainability. It's more about how we communicate with each other and finding common ground when you see things differently. Communication is key when you're, you know, at a dinner party and you're talking to someone and you think very differently about certain topics or something like that. But I think the more we can be curious about where the other person is coming from, why they have that perspective, and let the experience be your teacher, let that person help open your eyes maybe to a different way of thinking, I think that's really helpful.
Excellent. I'm going to try and find that link to the book. You said Difficult Conversations?
Yeah, Difficult Conversations by the Harvard Negotiation Project.
Got it. Okay, I think I have the right one. I'll put that in the chat in a minute.
And I do see that Martha has her hand up. I want to make sure to get her question too.
Yeah, well, your hand is probably sore from being raised for so long. So Martha, if you want to go for it.
Yeah, this is Martha Armis Kelly with Catholic Charities Environmental Justice Program. And I really appreciate the shaming part because I'm kind of bougie and I'm a farm girl and I'm working in a arena where everyone seems to be very very strong about what they see and how they want things to be done. And for me, it's like I'm coming into an environment when people don't know anything about environmental justice in communities that some of them are already practicing and great environmental justice advocates, yet they don't know, or it's totally the opposite. And really, when you talk to people, just regular folks, sometimes for me, it's worked out just to kind of say like, you know, I get it. You know, we've been kind of living large for a while and now it's affecting the environment. And let me show you how. So a lot of my ability to be able to work and navigate in those spaces is to kind of break down the barriers of why, you know, we do need to make a change. And a lot of that comes through films. I show a lot of films. I do a lot of art and I do a lot of photo voice. I do interviews with kids. And to hear children tell you what they would like to see in their earth or their space and in their environment is very impactful to adults because, you know, even though it's kind of in a sense shaming, it just puts things in perspective because I think that sometimes we tend to think that, you know, I'm older or I've already lived my life, let the younger people deal with it. But the younger people are really kind of looking to us as leaders and are the adults in their space to be proponents for change, even in their ideas or processes. They want that leadership and they want that contribution. So it's important for us to kind of find all the mediums, art, music, you know, poetry slams. I get the youth involved and try to get even like the youngest of kids because they have such a contribution as far as what their ideas and perspectives of the earth and how sustainability is key. It's needed, you know, so I just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent point. And I think you have my email. If you want to send me some of those stories or photos, I would love to see them. It just sounds really inspirational.
Well, I'm going to be working this year in Stanislaus at an affordable housing unit because part of my work kind of goes in all areas. And Erin, I really would like for you to come because I'm going to be talking about, you know, how we could start a project within these affordable housing units that would be related to environmental justice, not just transportation, but composting, gardening, and things that they could do in their spaces to contribute to those changes.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, are you still with Catholic Charities?
I'm still with Catholic Charities, but I started a fellowship with UC Berkeley in transportation. And it's really kind of looking towards the faces and changes of emerging issues in transportation for equity and inclusion. And I'm working with the othering and the belonging at UC Berkeley. So I'm really excited because this whole adventure of getting into environmental justice has just led me in so many different spaces. And again, it's always a new and exciting thing to be part of something so big. But for me, I've always looked at it at a neutral perspective because, again, being from Merced and being a farm girl, we have to learn how to have that happy medium. I do tend to push the agenda as far as I can with farmers, you know, but I do realize that, you know, we all have to eat. And right now, for me, the biggest thing is how can we create a more sustainable valley? Because just looking outside right now, this last year I was talking about it's gonna flood, and nobody wanted to listen to me. And I was saying about liquefaction and how the roads are gonna get compromised, and food is going to be one of the biggest issues. And if you notice, those roadways are getting more and more congested and more dangerous. So now more than any time, it's important for us to create sustainable thinking for folks to realize that those things that were so ready accessible are not going to be accessible, and how can we create food sources and a viability for people in the valley when things may change very quickly.
Yeah, agreed. Well said. All right. Does anyone know of any references to listservs or resources that include information about the construction of sustainable road surfaces, bike lanes, pedestrian paths, etc.?
You can look into Bike East Bay in the Bay Area. They're really active and doing incredible work on the connectivity of bike lanes throughout the East Bay and also into San Francisco County. So I would check them out on Twitter. They're pretty active on Twitter, but they probably have websites and things like that too. They do a lot of municipal work to change programming and things. Be a good resource.
Great, thanks. We're putting
Sure.
together a RAISE grant, so I know it's kind of an esoteric question for this seminar, but I take every opportunity to ask.
Yeah, I also know that the UC system has a transportation
Yes.
subcommittee and really active. They actually work with the Cal State transportation officers as well. So there's likely a wealth of knowledge in that group if you haven't tapped into it.
Thank you.
Looks like we've got another question in the chat.
Yeah, sorry, I was talking and it was muted. So yeah, it was a follow-up from the first question. Sometimes everyone is in agreement that the ideas on the table are great, but the next step of turning them into actions doesn't happen. What would you do to make this happen?
I always try to remember what's the goal of what we're trying to get to, and making sure that you have, strategic alignment among the group that you're working with and a clear collective consensus of what you're working towards. Because if you have that, you all have that framing and that understanding of what you want to do and why you want to get there and what that thing is that you're going towards. I really think that you can use those guardrails for decision making. I mean, there are a lot of great ideas out there, as you mentioned, but they don't all necessarily fit within that framework you've determined, hopefully at the outset of the project that you're working on. And so if you can be grounded in what that means as a group and use those parameters, I think it's a little bit easier to not feel so bad that an idea doesn't move forward because it might not fit within the context of what you're working on. So always go back to the goal. Have a clear goal, go back to that goal.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great advice. Hey, Martha, your hand is still raised. Do you have further questions? Okay. So going back to questions from the registration, what has been the most challenging obstacle in your projects and how have you worked towards overcoming them?
I mean, it's usually capacity to get things done, funding to get things done, navigating political structures to get things done. Those are usually the three that are the big challenges. I mean, I think it goes back again to building relationships. Relationships are going to be the number one, for me, relationships have been the number one thing to address all those other challenge issues. Because if you have really strong relationships and buy-in with people, you can navigate those political structures. You can secure funding because you have groupthink versus one individual person advocating for something. And you can also have built-in capacity because you're more than one person working on something. So I'd say just keep working on relationships to get over challenging situations. And a mentor of mine told me that sustainability in higher education is like Tai Chi. You sort of move and flow in one direction until you reach resistance, and then you move and flow in another direction until you meet resistance. So you really have to be nimble and flexible in this work. With sustainability, climate action type work, I mean, there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of ways you can do things. And so I think just recognizing that you're going to do the best that you can with what you have and try and be focused again on that goal, working with your team, and making sure you've got a direct line of sight, but giving yourself grace to slow down and reframe, I think is okay too when you come in alignment with those challenges. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, Jillian, thanks. I'd be interested to hear a little bit more your thoughts on, I guess, balancing sustainable initiatives that are kind of like scalable versus the kind of needs for a lot of them to be grounded in like local context and place. So like, for example, working on something like STARS, where you would ideally want any campus across the country to be able to kind of pick it up and run with it versus kind of your thesis work where, yes, starting with STARS is good, but then maybe there's these extra layers that you want to think about, like the climate zones and kind of that customizability or context specificity that is helpful. Like, have you found some successful techniques for kind of finding that right balance and kind of managing some of those tension points and trade-offs?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It makes me think about climate action planning work. At Brailsford and Dunlavey, when we work with different colleges and universities on a climate action plan, some of the time, most of the time, I'd say a lot of the time, you're working with folks in operations who are really dialed into emissions reduction through, you know, energy efficiency, building optimization, nuts and bolts. How do we get to net zero, right? Then you also have folks on the academic side who are, you know, these climate action plans and these decarbonization plans are moving more and more to being holistic. They're moving, you know, they're definitely grounded in operations, but they're also moving into how do we integrate these concepts into academic programming, because as higher education institutions, our business, our responsibility is education. That's what we do. So, you know, sometimes changing the curriculum, you know, that's a co-benefit to emissions reduction, but it's not necessarily going to move that needle, but it's very impactful. So I think you have to think again about what are you working on? What's your goal? What are you trying to get towards? If you're hyper focused on we are just doing emissions reduction, I'm just using a climate action plan or decarbonization plan as an example. But if you're hyper focused on things like emissions reductions, maybe you really drill into operations and you figure out how you're going to do that, where your emissions coming from. Okay, now that we know where they're coming from, how are we going to address them and how are we going to pay for it in a plan that's actionable and achievable for our institution? Now, if you want to be more expansive and you know that your institution really cares about social justice, diversity, equity, inclusion, the academic mission, the research mission, thinking about, you know, emissions reduction, but also communication and marketing strategies around that. Even though those solution sets might not drive that needle down, they're important because they inform and engage and raise awareness. If we're doing this work in a vacuum behind a closed door, people aren't going to know, oh my gosh, the campus emissions are down 25% because our buildings are more efficient now because of all the work that's been happening in facilities. If you're not talking about those things and taking the time to do the things that might not be scalable or have they might not feel like a big enough impact, you're losing that opportunity of educating people so that they can go away from your institution to educate other people, change their personal lives, or go into a professional environment as a student and have an impact there. So I think it's important to do the nuts and bolts work. Like, as a sustainability officer, it's really easy to get stuck in crunching numbers, doing your annual greenhouse gas inventory, doing STARS, constantly reporting things out and not really doing the implementation. So I'd say, you know, make sure that you are doing those pieces enough, but make sure you're also talking about what you're doing. I think it is a balance, like you say, and I think it really depends on what the project is, the goal of the project, and what is your leadership interested in, or the people on your team. What are you trying to get towards? You know, again, in this example, is it just eliminating emissions, or is it making sure everyone knows that you're doing that so you have awareness in your region as being a leader or something like that? I hope that helps.
Awesome. All right, and then from the registration, we had a question. What do you think is the best way to get the word out about sustainability programs?
Well, I'm a big fan of the AASHE bulletin. So if you're not signed up for that, it's an awesome newsletter where you can get, essentially links to the hottest topics in higher education and what people are doing, from, capital projects to upcoming events, job postings, curriculum changes all across the board. So the AASHE bulletin is great for higher ed sustainability stuff. I don't know, I read a lot of books, so I try to pay attention to what's coming out and, what's other white papers and things like that, to just try and see what's the current hot topic in sustainability, who's writing about it. There are orgs like 350.org based out of the Bay Area. They do a lot of really great work and have a lot of really great resources when it comes to divestment, emissions reduction, social justice and equity in the environmental movement, particularly around emissions reduction. If you're into things like Twitter and Instagram, follow people that do cool stuff in sustainability, whether it's a journalist or an influencer, you can learn that way too.
I'm actually really glad that you brought up books, because that was one of my other questions too. I like to ask everyone I meet if they could recommend one book to me, what would it be? Except for you, I want to kind of ask two, like a personal book and then a sustainability related book.
Well, the most recent sustainability book that has been my favorite is All We Can Save. And I forget the name of the editors of that, but it's a collection of essays, and it's incredibly focused on being positive and results driven. So, and because it's a collection of essays, you don't have to read it through from front to end. You can just pick an essay, and there are quite a few high profile authors in it that have written those essays. It's called All We Can Save. It's really great and motivational in times when it can be a struggle to do the work. It's hard work. So it's nice to see people having success out there. And I think we hear a lot about, things that aren't going well versus things that are. So All We Can Save, I would highly recommend that. And then this definitely has to do with sustainability, but it's not so hyper focused in the area. But one of my favorite books that I've been buying a lot of copies of for people is called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's a Native American who is also a botanist, and she teaches at SUNY ESF in New York. And the book is a memoir of hers talking about how she's trying to bridge her Native background with Western science. And it really is therapeutic and a beautiful story just about her life in upstate New York, raising her daughters and trying to revitalize the land that her home is on, and also be a good mentor and teacher to students. So that's a really great one too. And then I've been on a Cormac McCarthy kick. I know you only asked for two. So if you like Cormac McCarthy, he just put out 2 new books. I have not yet read those, but I started rereading the Border trilogy, which is All the Pretty Horses and The Crossing are the first 2 books that I've gotten through. And his stuff is dark, man, but sucks you in. He's a really great author. If you're a reader, check out Cormac McCarthy if you haven't already.
Okay, so what is his name? I didn't catch that.
I'll put it in the chat. Yeah.
Okay, I know the other ones. I loved All We Can Save. I thought it was really good, and it's very female focused, which I thought was great.
That's
bringing some of the females to the table, or female presenting folks. So that one's definitely worth a read. I do think that also they want to have like some All We Can Save groups, like local groups. So depending on where you're at, there might be certain groups that you can, they're called circles. So if you go to that website, All We Can Save, there's a circles tab, and you can host a circle, talk about climate crisis, build community solutions, things like that. So if you're interested in that, that might be fun.
I will also plug that Brailsford and Dunlavey has a campus and energy and sustainability podcast, and there's a really great one on decarbonization. I'll have to pull it up and put the link in the chat. Energy, there it is. But if you're a podcast person, that's another great way to get some cool information. And my colleague Dave Carlscott is the host of that podcast, and there are quite a few interesting stories on there.
Yeah, that sounds great. All right, any other questions?
Looks like something just popped up in the chat.
I work on fleet electrification in the San Joaquin Valley. One of the aspects we are involved is workforce development for successful zero emission transportation transition. What do you see as the academic or university level role in supporting this work?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a couple of really great models out there. Grid Alternatives is I think they're a not-for-profit. They might be a for-profit. I think they're a not-for-profit out of the Bay Area, and they do energy work in marginalized communities, and they're starting to do an EV infrastructure program. So Grid Alternatives is a great opportunity to, when I worked at Cal State East Bay, we would send students on their solar spring breaks. Students would go and do solar installs on indigenous properties and a variety of other areas. And I think they're doing some similar work around EV infrastructure. So Grid Alternatives would be great to look at for that. Also with the Inflation Reduction Act, there's going to be a lot of support for the type of work that you're doing. So funding wise, I would look there, and also into projects and programs that are going to be supported through that act. And then in addition to that, there is something called the EPIC N network. It used to be called Sustainable City Year, and you might be able to find it through Sustainable City Year still. Started in the University of Oregon, where college professors went to the local municipality and asked the municipality what work needed to be done around sustainability at the municipal level that could be done through courses on the college campus. So the professors were actually providing real world examples for the students to do work on, and then the city in exchange received that work. And yes, funding was shared, so the professors were paid and the municipality got work at a less expensive cost than if they hired a professional organization to do it, and then the students got real world experience out of it. So I think if you're trying to do that work at the municipal level, go to the local colleges and universities, community colleges, universities, research institutes, whatever they might be, and figure out how can you get some of that work done through the classroom. Also paid internships. A lot of times students have to complete service hours or internship hours to graduate, depending on their major, depending on where they go to school. So there's usually an opportunity through a community engagement office or an internship office at a college or university that you could work with as well to get students engaged. And, it doesn't have to be students that are engineers or, can do the heavy lifting type work. You're probably going to need students that can do marketing and communication, social media. There's a variety of different skill sets you're probably looking for. And so I'd encourage you to sort of think outside of the box when you're thinking about the type of students skill sets that you'd want to engage in that work.
Excellent. All right. For sake of time, I have one final question. If you had a magic wand and you could change anything related to sustainability in the world, what would you do?
Oh my gosh, that is a really hard question. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is I'd like for people just to try and see where other people are coming from, so we're not arguing so much over these things that are destroying the systems that are creating the large problems that we have. So that would be the off the cuff one. I'm going to give you more than one because that's kind of my MO. Another thing I would do if I could wave a wand is maybe get rid of some of this carbon in the atmosphere, give us a little bit more time to do some systematic change to, have less of an impact on the climate that's so rapidly changing. And also rapidly changing for marginalized communities much more than communities of wealth and privileged communities.
Great answer.
Thanks. That's a hard question. I should have, that's like a softball. I should have known that one was coming.
I know, because I ask everyone that question, so I should have warned you too. Well, thank you so much. This has been really inspirational. It's a great way to start off the new year. Thanks everyone for coming. Thank you, Jillian, for joining us, and stay tuned for next month's AMA. We're gonna talk about gardening with Chris McLaughlin. So feel free and zoom into that. I'll send out the Zoom link for that shortly after this. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you. Emails in the chat. Feel free to reach out, y'all. Good luck.
Thanks.
Take care
Bye.
out there. Be safe.
You too.
Thank you.